Story 1, my name is Cadence. I work the closing shift at a small dive bar in my town's quieter part. Right off the highway, this place has a parking lot with a back entrance open to the general town. It's nothing fancy, just a dimly lit spot, where the regulars know each other by name, and the jukebox has played the same classic rock rotation for years. Locals, truckers, passing through, and the occasional lost tourist looking for a stiff drink make up most of our customers. I like it, though. The routine is predictable, the tips are surprisingly decent, and I've learned to handle the usual bar crowd, the talkers, the flirters, the quiet drinkers, and the ones who just want to be left alone. Weekends are obviously a lot more hectic, but the thing about working during the week is I'm expected to handle my night shifts alone. I don't even get a bar back popping in now and again. Yeah, it's easier work and slower midweek, but I miss my coworkers' company. I tend to be pretty vigilant during my shifts because we do get the occasional bar fight, considering the crowds we attract. That's why I clocked the guy immediately. It was sometime after 1 a.m. on a Tuesday when he walked in. If I had to guess, I'd say late 40s. But he was extremely clean-cut and well-groomed, not the look you'd expect from a guy his age in an area like this. A black turtleneck underneath a black trench coat. Definitely well-dressed but casual about it. He had this aura of sophistication about him that makes you think of real money, not the loud look-at-me kind. He glanced around slowly before walking swiftly over to the bar to take a seat. I also remember him having oddly good posture, but that's neither here nor there. When I walked over, he glanced at the bottles behind me and ordered something top shelf without hesitation. As I poured his drink, he asked me if I liked working here, a smile on his face. It was a normal enough question, so I answered him honestly. I told him yeah, and smiled back. I then made a joke about being a bartender or something. I wish I could say I got a creepy vibe from him, but that's not the energy he was giving off. He genuinely seemed like a stand-up guy. Kind of like the single dad at his kid's baseball game, giving the whole team a high five. He chatted with me for a bit, which I didn't mind since the bar was pretty quiet then. Eventually, he asked me if I ever thought about doing something bigger, which I admit was somewhat bizarre. Again, though not a totally creepy question given the situation. I gave him my standard bartender smile and told him I was happy for now. He nodded and sipped his drink, seemingly disappointed at my answer for reasons I didn't understand. After a long pause, he asked me what time I got off. Out of nowhere. That question surprised me. I hadn't picked up any flirting from him whatsoever, so I was a little disappointed to discover our conversation had just been another empty attempt at getting my number. I smiled and gave him a vague answer, trying to brush him off in a friendly way without seeming uptight. Before he could answer, I busied myself wiping down the counter. He didn't press. He just smiled like he already knew. Then drained his drink and pulled out a crisp $100 bill, laying it gently on the bar like it was nothing. Then, without another word, he walked out into the night. I didn't really know what to make of the encounter. I know it sounds like nothing, but his demeanor was just so far off my radar that I was intrigued. Either way, I figured I'd never see him again and got on with my life. As it would turn out though, I was wrong. About a week later, he came back, only this time he wasn't alone. There was a woman with him. She drew my attention since I hadn't seen her before. Mid-30s, dressed in a way that didn't quite match her age. Trendy but off. Like someone trying too hard to blend in with a younger crowd. I watched her closely as they approached the bar. Everything about her seemed calculated, from the way she smiled too easily to how she leaned against the bar like we were already friends. As I set down napkins, the very first thing she said to me wasn't a hello or a drink order, but a compliment. She put on this overly joyful smile and said, "You're so pretty." Her fingers brushed against my arm as she said it, lingering just a second longer than normal. I laughed and thanked her, but I could instantly tell something was off about this woman. The man didn't speak, which I thought was also a little strange, given how talkative he'd been last time. They ordered drinks. I poured them, and that's when the questions flooded in. The woman asked how long I'd been working here, how old I was, and a bunch of other small talk questions, like that. I answered in short, polite sentences, but I sensed this wasn't small talk. She was studying me. At one point, she looked over at the man, and it seemed like they were communicating without speaking. She looked back at me and told me she ran an exclusive event club. She leaned in a bit, lowering her voice as if to prevent being overheard. She said she's always looking for young and fun people for private parties, and that I'd make a killing 10 grand for a weekend. I let out a small, forced laugh and told her it sounded too good to be true. She insisted it was real, and said, a bunch of girls like me worked for them. Her smile never faltered, which was starting to creep me out. She steered the conversation back to the job, circling the same words. Fun, safe, exclusive. Then, casually, she said, you should step outside. For a second, there's someone who can explain it better. My pulse kicked up. I wasn't playing around at that point. I didn't even pretend I wasn't creeped out. I'm good, I said in a firm voice. No smile this time. Just then, a group of customers walked in, laughing and talking loudly. The woman's expression changed instantly, her friendly mask slipping, slightly before she turned to the man beside her. Without another word, they left. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't unsettled after that. Those random people had propositioned me for God knows what. I told my coworkers and my boss about the situation, and we all agreed to keep an eye out should they return. My boss assured me he was always a 15-minute drive away should I need him, and the bar security cameras were typically enough to deter misbehavior. There wasn't much I could do beyond that. It's not like they'd done anything illegal. I tried to push it out of my head, but a few nights later after closing, I saw the car. It was parked across the street, engine off, just sitting there. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, but the feeling of being watched crawled over my skin like static. As I walked to my car, I kept my head down, keys clutched tight. When I pulled out of the lot, I checked my mirrors. The car followed. It stayed back just enough to avoid suspicion, but every turn I made, it was still there. I took a random turn onto a side street. It followed another turn, still there. I started freaking out internally. I knew it was them. I forced myself to stay calm, to think. Then, without hesitating, I navigated and pulled into a police station parking lot, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles practically turned white. The second I pulled in, the car sped off. Nothing happened after that for a while, but I knew it wasn't over. It turned out, I was right. It was a slow weekday shift, barely anyone coming in. By midnight, I was wiping down the counter, half thinking about closing early when the door creaked open. It was the woman. I immediately sent my boss a text as inconspicuously as possible. I looked back up, and the woman was staring at me with that same artificial smile. She walked slowly to the bar and sat down, hands folded neatly. I was debating just telling her to leave when she said, "Thought I'd come check on you." My stomach started twisting, but I hid it best I could. I told her we were about to close and she had to leave. But she made this pouty face and asked for just one old-fashioned. I thought about denying her, but figured pouring the drink would stall her long enough for my boss to arrive. So I turned around and got started, trying to keep my cool. And then I heard it. The soft, unmistakable click of the front door shutting. I whipped around. The woman was gone. I felt this awful pit in my stomach as I stepped toward the entrance. Through the glass, I saw it, a black van idling just outside. Without thinking, I locked the front door as quickly as I could. But then, metal rattling came from the back door. Someone was trying to get in. I didn't think. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could, a metal shaker, and clutched it like a weapon while dialing 911 with my other hand. There was no way the police would get there in time. I thought about making a run out the front door but didn't. For whatever reason, I was bracing myself for a fight when I saw headlights pulling into the lot. It was my boss. The sounds on the back door suddenly stopped. A few seconds later, the van screeched out of the lot. I embraced my boss and told him what happened. He said he'd gotten the license plate of the van as it was leaving. When the cops arrived, my boss reviewed the security footage with them. It was worse than I imagined. Just before the woman left, the cameras captured two masked figures crouching near the front door, waiting. There was another person in the back banging on the door with his fist, clearly trying to flush me out to the front. It was downright horrifying. To make matters worse, the plate number my boss caught turned out to be unregistered. It's been quite a while since this incident, but no progress has been made. The only good news is my boss doesn't make me work alone anymore. Despite that, I'm still extremely uneasy anytime I'm scheduled for a night shift. I still question how they knew I'd be working alone. It doesn't make any sense. Even now, I often think about what would have happened had I given in to fear and run out the front door. Story 2. I used to work the night shift at a gas station, convenience store off a quiet stretch of highway. I say used to because after what happened a few months ago, I won't work a night shift again. It's a small station, the kind that barely gets any business once it gets late. Most of my shift was spent restocking shelves, wiping down counters, and occasionally ringing up a trucker or traveler passing through. I remember the whole thing vividly. It was just past 2:30 a.m. By then, even the truckers had mostly dried up, and I was left with basically nothing to do. I scrolled mindlessly on my phone, trying to kill time. At one point, I stepped outside for some air, rubbing my hands together against the cold. I exhaled a few times, watching my breath disappear. The parking lot was empty, just the pumps, the road, and the dark stretch of trees beyond. The neon sign flickered faintly, and it was hazy out, like you could literally see the moisture in the air, even with the highway not too far off. It was pretty silent. Right as I was about to walk back towards the store, I noticed something move out of the corner of my eye. I whipped my head around and realized there was a person standing behind one of the pumps. How had I not noticed him earlier? He wore a dark red hoodie with the hood up, hands shoved in his pockets. No car in sight, so he obviously wasn't fueling up. The only thing was, he didn't seem to be heading towards the store either. He was just standing there, half turned toward the store like he was watching me. At first I figured maybe he was waiting for someone, but something about how he moved rubbed me the wrong way. He was kind of shuffling about in this circular pattern. I entered the store but kept an eye on him through the glass, pretending not to, hoping someone would drive up and pick him up. After a few minutes, he started walking toward the door, slow at first, then suddenly pushing inside like he'd made up his mind all at once. He walked up to the counter but didn't say anything right away, just stared at me like he was sizing me up. Then, in a rushed, almost rehearsed way, he muttered that his car had broken down just before the pumps. He said he needed a jump or maybe just a little gas to get to the next town. I was literally shocked. He wasn't even trying to make his story believable. I couldn't believe he actually expected me to buy his BS story. I offered to call a tow truck instead. No, he said too quick, shaking his head. He just needed a flashlight, maybe some help checking under the hood. Something was definitely off. The way he spoke, the way he watched my reaction, it felt like a test. To be fair, people walking into gas stations at that hour are usually a little strange. I started wondering whether he actually needed help and was just an odd person, or on something. I asked him where his car was parked, and he told me just beyond the highway entrance. I was obviously skeptical, but then he pointed at the monitor behind me. I turned to look at the screen, and to my surprise, there actually was a car parked out there. I thought to myself, oh crap, maybe this guy really does need help. And that's when it hit me. I had literally just been outside, and I would have remembered a car parked out there. I glanced back at the monitor, and saw the slightest movement near the car's back bumper. Someone was crouching just out of view. A cold wave of dread hit me. I forced a casual smile and agreed to help the guy, but not before telling him I needed to grab my phone from the back office. I turned slowly, not wanting to spook him, but the second I was out of his direct sight, I slammed my hand onto the emergency panic button under the counter. The alarm went off instantly, screeching through the store. I expected him to attack me, but what he did instead was even more unsettling. His nervous energy disappeared. No more fake urgency, no more shifting foot to foot. He actually relaxed. His whole body language shifted, and then he smiled. Not a panic smile, not an embarrassed one either. A slow, knowing grin, like he had all the time in the world, like this was amusing to him. I was in shock. I didn't even have time to get physical. In one fluid motion, he turned and bolted. I ran to the monitors just in time to see both of them take off, not toward the car, but into the woods behind the station. The car just sat there, engine off, headlights off, no one inside. By the time the police arrived, it was exactly as I saw it. The car was still there, but the men were gone. No footprints leading away, no sign of them anywhere. Then one of the officers pointed something out, something I hadn't noticed before. The front passenger door was open. There had been a third person inside the whole time. The police took my statement, I turned over the surveillance footage, and that was that. A few days later, they followed up. They had the car towed and ran the plates. It turned out it had been reported stolen nearly a week earlier, over 100 miles away. No one had come forward to claim it. No reports of missing persons, no other crimes linked to it. Just an abandoned vehicle in the middle of nowhere with no explanation. That was months ago, and still nothing. I don't know why convenience stores are such popular targets, but I can say for sure I will never work another night shift again. Story 3, this happened a couple weeks ago. I worked the night shift at Walmart. It's not the worst job in the world, but after a while, it starts to feel like you're just floating through time. The nights blend together, same shelves, same routine, same dull hum of the overhead lights. Hopefully, something better comes along. I usually hang out in and stock the electronics section, which is nice because it's quieter. People don't exactly come rushing in at 2 a.m. to buy phone chargers and Bluetooth speakers. Most customers are night owls, killing time, or truckers, grabbing last-minute supplies before heading back on the road. That's why I noticed him at first. I didn't think much of it, just another guy wandering the aisles, probably waiting for someone. But after a few minutes, I realized he wasn't shopping. He wasn't even pretending to. He just kept appearing. Every time I glanced up, lingering nearby, hovering in the next aisle over, or standing a little too still by the clearance section, he wasn't looking at anything. He was just standing there, watching me. I told myself I was overthinking it. The store is big, maybe he was just taking his time. But the way he moved, always just close enough for me to notice. Never actually picking anything up, set something deep in my gut on edge. I was waiting for him to just get on with it and ask for my number, but he never approached. It was like he wanted me to see him, which didn't make sense. I went to radio someone, but realized the batteries in my radio must have been dead because it wasn't working. Eventually, I debated going to find a manager when I felt a hand wrap around my arm. I nearly jumped out of my skin. But before I could react, a woman's voice rang out. Loud, friendly, overly familiar. She exclaimed, "There you are." Before going on a little spiel about how she'd been looking all over for me, I turned, completely thrown off, and saw a woman I'd never seen before. She was smiling, her grip firm on my arm like we were old friends, reuniting. Before I could say anything, she leaned in and whispered, her tone dropping to something low and urgent. "That guy's been recording you. Follow me." My stomach dropped. I turned my head slightly, just enough to glance back. The man was still there, only now he wasn't even pretending to browse. He was staring right at me. A cold wave of fear crept over me. I let her pull me. I didn't even question it. The way she grabbed me, the way she spoke so loud and casually, like we were friends. I clung to it, beyond grateful someone had realized and put herself out to help me. She kept up the act as we walked, rambling about a trip or an inside joke we supposedly shared. I barely processed the words. My thoughts were stuck on him. Had he really been recording me? That was creepy as hell. I wanted to know if he was still following, but I couldn't muster the courage to turn around just yet. The woman steered me through the aisles, moving fast. I barely noticed where we were going, only that the distance between me and that man was growing. I was kind of expecting her to quit the pretending at some point, but she kept it up. At one point, it was getting uncomfortable, so I glanced behind me. To my relief, that man was no longer following. The woman kept pulling me forward, though. I told her we were good now and should probably find my manager, but she just squeezed my arm tighter, telling me he was lurking somewhere. I thought, so what? What's he going to do in a store full of employees? I'd been worried at first because no one was around, but now that I wasn't alone, I realized there wasn't much point being scared anymore. I told her this, but she continued moving. I told her I was serious and planted my feet, twisting my arm slightly to loosen her grip. "You can let go now," I said, but she didn't. She smiled at me, but something in it was off. "Come on, just a little further," she said, basically tugging me. At that point, I glanced around. The store was basically dead. We had moved past the registers, past the self-checkout, past the busy aisles. The warehouse section loomed ahead, dimly lit and nearly empty. Beyond that was the side exit, the one without cameras, the one employees use for loading shipments. That's when it dawned on me. She was leading me straight to the exit. I didn't think. I screamed for help as I yanked my arm free of her grasp with all my might. She lost her grip just enough. I didn't waste another second. I turned and ran toward the front of the store. As I fled, she yelled out something behind me, for me to come back, followed by my name, which I hadn't given her. I kept running until I saw one of my coworkers running toward me, likely reacting to my screaming. I told him to call security, which he promptly did. That woman was long gone by then. By the time I told my story to security, both that woman and that man were nowhere in sight. They reviewed the footage, and just as I suspected, the woman and man walked into the store together. She had been with him the entire time. The man's face was clear as day in one frame, but hers was always turned away. I had a feeling she was the mastermind, so I was infuriated the cameras hadn't picked her face up. Every second had been planned. The police got involved. The whole thing went down as a failed abduction attempt. I'm still waiting for a resolution. Bad man should be easy to track down, given his face was caught. I have no idea how that woman knew my name. That's what terrifies me the most. Those people hadn't just picked me at random. I was a direct target.